Far away from Earth, in a galaxy full of light and strange worlds, there was an empire ruled by an alien called King Thalon. He was tall, strong, and proud, with golden skin that shimmered like fire under the twin suns. His people feared him, and his enemies trembled when they heard his name. Beside him sat Queen Soraya, a woman of great beauty, her silver eyes calm and deep like frozen oceans. She rarely spoke, but when she did, even the stars seemed to listen. The palace of King Thalon floated high above a blue world, surrounded by clouds that glowed with strange energy. It was made of shining stone and gold, filled with alien guards and machines that hummed softly like living things. Every corner of the palace spoke of power, pride, and silence, and on that day, a group of alien soldiers entered the throne room, dragging with them a prisoner, a human. The human's name was Ethan Cross. He had been captured during a border fight between Earth ships and the alien fleet. He was hurt, tired, and angry, but his eyes still burned with courage. The guards threw him to the floor, and the king looked down at him like one might look at an insect. "So this is the creature that defied my patrol," Thalon said slowly, his deep voice echoing through the hall. Ethan raised his head, breathing hard. "I fought because your ships attacked first," he said. The guards laughed, and even the king smiled coldly. "No human speaks in my hall without permission," Thalon said. "But you have spirit, I will give you that." The queen watched silently, her face unreadable. Her eyes stayed on Ethan for a long time, as if she saw something the others could not. Then the king stood, his golden armor glowing with light. He walked down from his throne, stopping just in front of the human. "You wish to serve something greater, human?" Thalon asked mockingly. Ethan frowned, confused. "Serve?" he repeated. "Yes," the king said, his eyes sharp. "You will serve my queen." A murmur passed through the room. The guards looked at each other in shock. No human had ever been allowed near the royal family. The king smiled again, enjoying their fear. "You will clean her chambers, carry her things, obey her every word," he said. "It will remind your kind of their place." Ethan's jaw tightened. His pride screamed inside him, but he knew that if he refused, death would come fast. He glanced at the queen, who still watched him in silence. Her expression soft but distant for a moment. He thought he saw sadness in her eyes. Then she turned away, and the guards pulled him back to his feet. "Take him," the king said. "Let the queen see what a human is good for." Ethan was dragged through the shining halls of the palace, past tall windows that looked out over glowing skies and alien ships moving like shadows in light. He saw worlds far below, strange lands full of forests that floated in seas of silver mist. Everything was beautiful but cold, and deep inside he felt small, yet a spark of defiance still burned in his heart. That night the queen's chamber was silent. The walls glowed softly, covered with ancient alien symbols. Ethan entered, unsure what to do. The queen stood near the window, her back turned to him, her silver hair shining under the moonlight of 2 moons. "You are the human the king sent," she said quietly. "Yes, my queen," he answered carefully. She turned to face him. Her beauty struck him like lightning, not because she was human-like, but because she was otherworldly. Her skin shimmered faintly like stars hidden under glass. Her eyes glowed softly as she studied him. "Tell me," she said, "why do humans fight?" Ethan looked confused. "To survive," he said after a pause. The queen nodded slowly. "Strange," she whispered. "So do we," for a moment. Silence filled the room. Ethan looked around, noticing strange energy symbols glowing faintly on the floor. They pulsed softly in rhythm with the queen's heartbeat. He did not know that those symbols were older than the empire itself. Older than the king, older even than the stars they ruled. As the queen dismissed him for the night, she stood again by the window. She whispered something, a word he could not understand, but it sounded like his name outside. A strange light moved across the sky, a shadow of something vast and watching. The palace lights flickered for a second, and somewhere deep below the palace, an ancient machine hummed, like it was waking from a long sleep. The king, sitting on his golden throne, opened his eyes suddenly. He felt a chill, something had changed. The order he had given, the punishment he thought was simple, had already started to change his fate, and soon he would regret the moment he ever commanded a human to serve his queen. The next morning, soft golden light filled the alien palace. Strange birds with crystal wings flew past the tall windows. Singing in deep metallic tones, Ethan woke on a cold metal bed in a small servant's room, his wrists still sore from the chains that had been removed. He looked around. The walls were smooth, alive, almost breathing. The palace was not just made, it was grown. Every curve pulsing with faint light like veins of energy. A deep sound echoed through the halls. Calling all servants to their duties, Ethan stepped outside, followed by alien guards who never smiled. He was taken to the Queen's chamber again. His heart heavy but alert, the Queen, Soraya, stood near the giant window, her long silver hair flowing behind her like mist. She turned slowly when he entered, her eyes calm but distant. "So, the king's command still stands," she said softly. Ethan bowed slightly, unsure of what to say. "Yes, my queen," he answered quietly. "Then serve," she said, pointing toward a table filled with strange glowing fruits and crystal vials. Ethan walked carefully, unsure what these alien things were, but tried to follow her silent instructions. He placed the food before her on a golden tray, and she sat, graceful like a dream. For a long time, neither spoke. Only the faint hum of the palace filled the room. Finally, the Queen said, "You do not belong here, human." Ethan looked up, his eyes steady. "I didn't choose to be here," he said. Her lips curved faintly. Not quite a smile, more like a thought. "The king enjoys breaking those who refuse to kneel," she said. "He wants to see fear in your eyes." Ethan stayed silent. But inside, his anger burned like fire. Soraya noticed it. She could feel his emotions. Strange, strong, full of life. It was something her people had lost long ago. Humans were weak in body, but powerful in spirit. She had never seen that fire before, and it stirred something inside her she could not name. Later that day, she told him to clean the old chamber beside hers. It was dark and full of ancient carvings glowing faintly in blue light. Ethan wiped the walls, but then he saw something strange. A symbol carved deep into the stone. It looked just like the mark he had seen on the Queen's wrist. When his hand brushed it, the symbol flickered, and a pulse of light ran through the room. He stumbled back, shocked. The air felt heavy, alive. He could almost hear whispers, old and distant, speaking in a language he didn't know. The Queen appeared at the doorway, her expression unreadable. "You touched the mark," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "It reacted," he said, confused. Soraya walked in slowly, her steps graceful yet tense. "That mark is older than our empire," she whispered. "It should not respond to you," Ethan frowned. "Then why did it?" The Queen looked at him, her silver eyes glowing faintly. "I do not know," she said, "but it means something." As she turned to leave, the mark on her own skin began to glow faintly. Ethan saw it and gasped. "It's the same," he said. She looked down. The glowing line under her wrist pulsed with the same rhythm as the wall. For a moment, both of them stood in silence, watching the strange light fade. Neither could explain it, but they both felt a pull, something ancient linking them that night. Ethan was given food and told to stay close to the Queen's quarters. The alien guards whispered as he passed, mocking him, calling him the Queen's pet. He ignored them, though his blood boiled. He had learned to control his anger, but deep inside, he made a silent promise. He would not be anyone's pet. He would find a way to survive, maybe even fight back inside her room. Soraya could not sleep. She walked to the window, watching the blue horizon, her heart uneasy. The mark still glowed softly under her skin, and every time she thought of Ethan, it shimmered stronger. She had read old scrolls, stories of ancient beings who mixed human and alien blood to awaken the lost power of creation. But those were myths, or so she believed now. The impossible was happening before her eyes. A human, a creature from a small distant planet, had somehow awakened the old mark. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, the queen of an empire, chosen by destiny yet trapped by her own king. She whispered softly to herself, "What are you, human?" At that same moment, in the lower halls of the palace, a shadow moved. One of the king's spies had heard everything. He had seen the queen and the human together in the chamber. He ran quietly through the corridors, his mechanical eye glowing red. He knew the king must be told. Far above, in his golden throne room, King Thalan looked at the stars with pride and control, but even he could sense a strange disturbance. The palace air felt charged, as if something unseen was awakening. He frowned, his voice low and sharp. "The human is more than he seems," he said to himself. And somewhere in the dark, the shadow whispered, "Yes, my king." The next day would bring fire, suspicion, and the beginning of a secret that could destroy the entire empire. The queen had asked one question: "What are you, human?" But soon everyone in the galaxy would demand the same answer. The night after the strange event, the palace slept under the twin moons, their soft light flowing through the glass towers like silver fire. Ethan could not sleep every time he closed his eyes. He saw the glowing mark, pulsing with light whenever he was near the queen. Something had connected them, something old and unseen. He sat on his bed, staring at his hands, wondering how a human like him could be part of something so strange. In the royal chamber, Queen Soraya stood near her mirror, the same glow faintly alive beneath her skin. She touched it gently, feeling the warmth under her palm, and for the first time she felt afraid. The mark was a symbol of prophecy, something she had only read about in forbidden records. It was said that one day, a creature not of their kind would awaken the core light, the power that once created worlds. But she had never believed in such old stories. Until now, the next morning, Ethan was called again to her chamber. He walked past guards who glared at him with cold eyes, whispering among themselves when he entered. The queen was standing beside a floating map made of blue light, showing countless stars and planets. She did not look at him when she spoke. "Do you know what happened yesterday?" Ethan shook his head. "No, my queen, but that symbol reacted when I touched it." Her gaze met his, soft yet sharp. "That mark is part of me, human," she said, "and it should never respond to your kind." She waved her hand, and the glowing pattern on her wrist appeared again. It pulsed once, and the same light flashed faintly from Ethan's chest. He gasped and stepped back. What is this?" The queen looked startled but calm. "It seems you are linked to the royal bloodline," she said slowly. "But how is impossible?" Ethan frowned, confused. "Linked? I'm just a soldier. I'm not part of your people." The queen studied him with quiet intensity. "Perhaps not by blood, but by fate," she whispered. The energy between them filled the room like invisible wind, soft yet powerful. Neither spoke for a long moment, both feeling the strange connection grow stronger. Outside the chamber, a spy watched through a hidden scanner, his mechanical eye recording everything. He quickly turned away and ran down the corridor to the king's council. He knew this was no simple service anymore. This was dangerous. The queen and the human were bound by something that could change everything. Back inside, the queen finally broke the silence. "You must not speak of this to anyone," she said firmly, her tone filled with quiet command. "If the king learns of this bond, he will destroy you without hesitation." Ethan nodded, his voice steady. "Then maybe he should know." The queen turned sharply. "You don't understand. Thalon fears what he cannot control." She stepped closer, her silver eyes glowing softly. "If he thinks you can influence me, he will kill you." Ethan looked at her, his voice calm but brave. "I don't want power. I just want to live." For a second, the queen almost smiled, something soft flickering in her gaze. "You are strange for a human," she said quietly, "but perhaps that is why the stars have chosen you." Later that evening, she took him to the lower chamber again, the place where the ancient carvings glowed, where the mark had reacted this time. The air was different, warmer, alive. The queen raised her hand, and the symbols on the wall began to move like flowing water. Ethan felt the same pulse rise in his chest, as if his heartbeat matched the rhythm of the glowing walls. Then suddenly, the entire chamber lit up. A beam of light connected the mark on the wall, the queen's wrist and Ethan's chest. Both of them gasped. Visions filled their minds. They saw stars being born, planets forming, and a voice whispering through the light, "Balance must return." Then everything went dark. Ethan fell to his knees, breathing hard. The queen trembled slightly but kept her balance, her eyes wide with awe. "What was that?" Ethan asked in shock. "The core," she whispered. "The heart of creation itself." She turned toward him, her expression serious. "You have awakened something that should have stayed asleep." In that moment, far above them, the king sat on his throne as the lights flickered across the palace again. He frowned deeply, feeling the strange surge of power. He stood calling his guards. "Find the source of that energy," he ordered. His voice echoing, the guards ran, following the pulse that led deep below the palace, straight to the queen's secret chamber. Meanwhile, Ethan and Soraya stared at each other. They both felt something had changed forever. The bond between them was no longer just magic. It was alive. The queen whispered almost to herself, "The core responds to both of us." Ethan nodded slowly. Then it means we're connected. She looked away, her heart heavy. Connection between human and royal blood is forbidden, she said softly. It could destroy us both, Ethan's voice was steady. Or save us, but before she could answer, the sound of heavy boots echoed down the corridor. The palace guards were coming. The queen turned sharply, her eyes wide. They found us, she said. Ethan clenched his fists. Then we run. The queen hesitated, torn between her duty and something she could not explain. And as the doors burst open, the golden light of the guards filled the chamber. The queen stepped forward, her voice calm but cold. No one touches him, she said. The guards froze. Even they dared not disobey their queen. The bond had begun to change everything. And the real war between love, loyalty, and destiny was only beginning. The great palace shook as the guards stormed down the golden corridors. Their boots echoing like thunder, Ethan stood beside the queen, his heart racing as the sound of armor clashed through the halls. The light from the ancient chamber flickered wildly. Throwing strange shadows across the walls, he turned to Soraya. They're coming, he said in a low voice. The queen nodded, her eyes calm but fierce. You must not show fear, she whispered. He can smell it. Moments later, the great doors burst open, and King Thalon entered with his guards. His armor burned with golden fire, his eyes sharp like lightning. He looked at Ethan first, and not as a man, but as something less than life. Then his gaze turned to the queen, cold and full of suspicion. What game is this, Soraya? He demanded, his voice deep enough to shake the walls. The queen stood tall, her face still and proud. No game. My king, she said quietly. You lie, Thalon roared. I felt the pulse of forbidden power from this room. He pointed toward Ethan. That creature has no right to stand beside you. Ethan clenched his fists but said nothing. The queen stepped forward. He did nothing wrong. The mark reacted to him, not by his will but by something greater. Thalon's eyes narrowed. The core, he said slowly, as if tasting the word. He turned his glare to Ethan. You dare touch what belongs to our bloodline. Ethan met his gaze without fear. I didn't choose this, he said. Thalon smirked darkly. Then you will die for it. The queen moved quickly, standing between them. Her silver eyes burned with light. If you harm him, the core may vanish forever, she said. The king laughed, a sound that echoed like thunder. Do you think I fear legends? He raised his hand and energy crackled around his palm, glowing gold and red. But before he could strike, the mark on the queen's wrist flashed bright. A beam of white light shot between her and Ethan. Pushing everyone back, the guards stumbled, covering their eyes. The king lowered his hand slowly, shock and rage twisting his face. The queen's voice rose above the silence, calm and strong. You see, my king, this is no illusion. The core has chosen. Thalon stepped back, trembling with fury. Chosen? You dare suggest a human could be part of the prophecy? Soraya's voice was steady. I do not suggest it, I feel it, for the first time. The king's pride cracked. Fear flickered in his eyes. He turned sharply toward his guards. Lock him away, he ordered. I will tear the truth from his soul myself. The guards rushed forward. Grabbing Ethan by the arms, the queen tried to stop them. But the king raised his hand again, his power striking the ground. The entire room shook as sparks of gold lightning ran through the walls. Ethan struggled, shouting, You don't understand, it's not just me. The king's voice thundered, Silence. Human. They dragged Ethan through the long, glowing halls toward the dungeons. The queen followed until the king blocked her path. You have betrayed your crown, he said coldly. Soraya met his gaze without flinching. If truth is betrayal, then yes. The king's eyes blazed with anger. You will regret defying me. When Ethan was thrown into a dark cell, he sat against the cold wall, breathing heavily. He looked down at his chest. The mark still glowed faintly under his skin. He could hear the palace humming again, alive with strange energy somewhere above. The queen was standing alone against the king, and Ethan felt the bond between them pulse like a heartbeat. In the throne room, Thalon called his council. Old alien lords gathered, whispering in fear. The core light cannot awaken, one said. It will destroy us. Another spoke. Perhaps the human is the key. Thalon slammed his fist down. No human holds power in my empire, he said fiercely. But deep down, even he felt the pull, the strange energy that made the air tremble. Meanwhile, Soraya walked silently through the empty corridors, her mind torn. She had always been loyal to her king, to her people, to the ancient law, but now, something in her heart whispered that Ethan was not the enemy. He was the sign. The mark under her wrist glowed brighter as she thought of him. She could feel his pain, his fear, even from far away. As night fell, the palace lights dimmed and the stars outside shimmered with quiet fire. The queen entered the secret archive, a place forbidden even to the king. She searched old tablets, holograms, and glowing stones until she found it. An ancient prophecy carved in alien script, it said, "When two lights of different worlds unite, the core shall awaken, and the throne of stars shall fall." Soraya's eyes widened. She understood now. Ethan was part of destiny itself. The king's wrath was not only against a human, it was against fate. She turned quickly and whispered, "I must save him." At the same moment, deep in the dungeon, Ethan heard footsteps. A faint blue light appeared beyond the iron bars. The door opened silently, and there she stood, the queen, cloaked in shadow and silver light. "Come," she said softly. "We have little time." Ethan rose, surprised but grateful. "You came for me," he whispered. The queen nodded. "The king will not stop until one of us is gone." As they ran through the silent halls, alarms began to sound in the distance. The king's voice echoed through the palace, full of rage. "Find them both." The queen and the human ran toward the lower chambers, their path lit by the pulsing light of destiny. And far behind them, the king's wrath grew like a storm that could swallow worlds. The palace alarms screamed across the night sky, red lights flashing like falling stars. Ethan and Queen Soraya ran through the endless silver corridors, their footsteps echoing against the golden walls. Behind them, the voices of soldiers grew louder, mixed with the sharp sound of metal and the hum of energy weapons. Soraya led him down a narrow passage hidden behind ancient carvings, a path few in the Empire even knew existed. "This way," she whispered. "It leads to the oldest part of the palace, the foundation." Ethan followed without question, his heart pounding, the air around them glowing with strange energy. Every few seconds, the mark on his chest flickered like a heartbeat of light, guiding their steps through the dark. Finally, they reached a massive door made of stone and living metal, covered with glowing alien symbols. It looked ancient, older than the Empire itself. Soraya placed her hand against it, and the mark on her wrist began to glow brighter. The door trembled, the ground shook, and slowly, the ancient gate opened with a deep rumbling sound. A vast chamber lay beyond, filled with soft blue light. In the center stood a colossal structure floating in the air, shaped like a crystal heart surrounded by rotating rings of light. Ethan stared in awe. "What is this place?" he asked quietly. Soraya looked at him, her voice calm but reverent. "This is the core of creation, the source of our empire's power, the beginning of everything." They stepped closer, the light from the core reflecting in their eyes. The moment they did, the floating rings slowed. As if recognizing their presence, the air grew warmer, alive with whispering sounds, like voices speaking from another time. Ethan touched his chest, feeling the pull growing stronger. "It's calling to me," he said softly. Soraya nodded. "It calls to both of us." The queen turned toward the ancient control pillars around the core, pressing her hand to one of them. The mark on her wrist expanded, forming lines of light across her arm. "The energy is awakening," she said. "It reacts to the bond we share." Ethan stepped forward, the light around him brightening, the mark on his chest pulsing in rhythm with hers. Suddenly, the core flared with blinding brightness, sending waves of golden fire across the room. Ethan gasped, falling to his knees as visions filled his mind. He saw stars being born, galaxies spinning, and ancient beings shaping worlds with their hands. He saw both humans and aliens standing together under one sky. And then he saw darkness, war, destruction. The voice returned again, echoing through the light. "Two souls, one purpose. Awaken the balance." When the light faded, Ethan was shaking but alive. The queen knelt beside him, her eyes glowing with tears. "You saw it too," she said softly. He nodded weakly. "The beginning and the end." Soraya looked up at the core, her face full of awe and fear. This power could rebuild worlds, or destroy them, but their moment of peace was short. The ground suddenly shook, and the sound of soldiers echoed from the passage above. The king had found them. His voice boomed from the doorway, filled with fury. "You dare awaken the core without my command." Thalen stepped into the chamber, his golden armor blazing, his guards behind him ready to strike. He pointed at Ethan. "Step away from her." Human. Ethan stood, his body trembling but his eyes steady. You can't stop this, he said. Thelon laughed darkly. I am the king. I stop whatever I choose. He raised his hand and a spear of golden energy formed. Crackling with heat, Soraya shouted, No! And threw herself in front of Ethan as the spear struck. The light exploded across the room, knocking everyone to the ground. When the dust cleared, the queen lay on the floor, a faint burn mark glowing on her arm. Ethan dropped beside her, fear and rage twisting inside him. Soraya, he called, his voice breaking. She opened her eyes weakly. The core. It will respond to your heart, she whispered. Not his hate. The king stepped closer, ready to strike again, but before he could, the core roared with light. A wave of pure energy blasted outward, throwing Thelon and his guards back. The floating rings around the core began to spin faster, the chamber shaking as if the universe itself was moving. Ethan stood slowly, his eyes glowing faintly now, his body surrounded by light. The queen looked up at him in awe. It's choosing you, she said. The king shouted, No. The core belongs to me. He raised his weapon again, but the core responded with another burst of light. This time the energy surrounded Ethan completely. Lifting him off the ground, symbols of ancient light appeared across his arms and chest, merging with the mark that bound him to the queen. The entire room vibrated, the sound like the heartbeat of a god. Soraya reached out, her voice shaking. Ethan, control it or it will destroy you. He tried to focus, but the visions flooded back, stars dying, empires burning, and the king screaming in darkness. Ethan clenched his fists, his voice firm. I won't let it end like that. He raised his hand, and the light obeyed, wrapping around the core like flowing water. The chamber stilled, the hum fading into silence. When the light finally dimmed, the core floated quietly again, glowing like a sleeping heart. The king lay on the floor, stunned but alive. The queen stood weakly beside Ethan, her hand on his shoulder. You did it, she whispered. You awakened the cores and saved us. Ethan looked at her, his voice soft. No, we did, but deep in the core, something continued to pulse, a hidden spark, a signal sent far beyond the galaxy. As they watched the light fade, none of them knew that the true awakening had only just begun. The palace was silent after the awakening. Only the faint hum of the core echoed through the air like a heartbeat beneath the floors. The light that had once burned through the chamber now glowed softly. Calm but alive, Ethan stood beside the queen, both breathing heavily, still shaken by the power they had unleashed. The king, Thelon, sat slumped against the golden wall, his armor cracked and his pride wounded deeper than his flesh. His eyes glowed faintly, not with strength, but with something darker, envy. Soraya looked down at him, her voice quiet but filled with sadness. It didn't have to be this way, she said. The king laughed softly, though there was no joy in it. You've always believed in fate, Soraya, but you never understood power. He raised his head slowly, his golden crown tilting to one side. Power is taken. Not given, Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. The core doesn't belong to anyone, not even you. Thelon's eyes flashed. A human dares to lecture a king, he hissed. You are nothing, a servant, a mistake. Ethan didn't look away. Maybe I was a servant once, he said, but now I serve something greater, the truth. The queen placed a hand on Ethan's arm, stopping him from saying more. Thelon, she said softly, your empire is dying because of your pride. But the king only smiled, and that smile was colder than space itself. Later, as the queen and Ethan returned to the higher levels of the palace, a strange silence followed them. The guards who had once obeyed the king now looked uncertain, their eyes shifting between loyalty and fear. Word had spread fast. The core had awakened and the human had been chosen. Many whispered that the queen and the human had broken ancient laws, while others whispered that they had saved the empire. But deep in the shadows of the royal halls, betrayal was already forming. Thelon's most trusted general, Vrax, knelt before his wounded king in secret. My lord, he said, the people talk. They say the queen has turned against you, that she stands with the human. Thelon's eyes narrowed. Then we will remind them who rules this world, he said darkly. But the core's power. Vrax began, but the king cut him off. The core's power will be mine, even if it means destroying everything else. That night, the queen stood on her balcony, the twin moons shining above her. The wind carried whispers through the towers. whispers of fear, hope, and change. Ethan joined her quietly, his eyes tired but full of thought. "The people are scared," he said softly. "They don't know what happens next," Soraya nodded. "Neither do we," she admitted. "But I know one thing. The core responds to balance, not domination." Ethan looked at her. "And Thalon is the opposite of balance." She smiled faintly. "Yes, and that is why he will fall." But neither of them knew that in the depths of the palace, the king was already preparing his revenge. He stood before the throne, his armor repaired, his crown reforged. In his hands he held a shard of pure dark energy, torn from the core's reaction earlier. It pulsed like a living wound, whispering to him, feeding his anger. "With this," Thalon said to himself, "I will take back what's mine." The next morning, chaos erupted. Explosions rocked the lower halls as the king's loyal guards attacked the queen's supporters. Blue fire spread through the palace corridors. Alarms wailed again. Ethan and Soraya rushed toward the core chamber. Knowing Thalon would go there first, "He means to take it by force," Soraya said. Her eyes wide with fear, Ethan clenched his fists. "Then we stop him." When they reached the chamber, the king was already there, standing before the core with the dark shard in his hand. He turned as they entered, his face lit by the eerie glow. "You should have left when you had the chance," Thalon said, his voice echoing. "The core cannot be controlled through hate," Soraya said. Stepping forward, Thalon laughed. "Then let's see what hate can do." He plunged the dark shard into the core, and the entire chamber exploded with red light. The walls trembled, the air screamed, and energy tore through every corner of the palace. Ethan shielded Soraya as the blast hit them, but the power was overwhelming. The core's calm blue light turned crimson, its rings spinning violently. "It's corrupting," Soraya shouted, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "The balance is breaking." Thalon raised his arms, his eyes burning with madness. "At last I hold the power of creation," he screamed. But the core's energy began to consume him, wrapping around his body like fire. Ethan ran forward, shouting, "Stop! You'll destroy everything!" The king turned, his voice trembling with rage and pain. "If I cannot rule this world, no one will." The queen raised her hands, summoning her light to shield Ethan. Together their marks glowed brighter, fighting against the core's dark storm. But Thalon's power was immense. His hatred feeding the chaos, the chamber cracked, pieces of golden metal falling from the ceiling. "Soraya," Ethan shouted, "we have to close the core." She nodded. "But to do that, we must use our bond." Ethan placed his hand over hers, their marks pulsing together. A beam of white light surged from their joined hands, reaching the heart of the core. The red light fought against it, screaming like a living thing for a moment. It seemed as if the darkness would win, but then something changed. The white light grew stronger, brighter, pure, the core responded, pushing the darkness away. Thalon screamed as the red energy turned against him. The last thing he saw was the faces of the two he tried to destroy, united, glowing with the light of the core. Then the chamber exploded in silence. When the dust cleared, the king was gone, his crown shattered on the floor. The core floated quietly once more, shining softly in calm blue light. Ethan fell to his knees, exhausted, while Soraya stood beside him, tears in her eyes. "It's over," she whispered. "The king is gone." But Ethan shook his head weakly, looking at the core. "No," he said. "Something else has awakened, far beyond the palace, in the dark of space." A new light flickered, an eye opening among the stars, and its whisper reached the galaxy like a storm. "The balance has shifted." The palace was silent, a silence so deep it felt alive. The golden halls that once echoed with orders and pride were now filled only with the soft hum of the core. Dust floated gently in the air, glowing in the faint blue light that seeped through the broken walls. The Great War was over, but its echo lingered in every corner of the empire. Ethan opened his eyes slowly, his body weak, his vision hazy. He was lying beside the core, which now shone with calm white light, pulsing gently like the heartbeat of a sleeping star. The queen knelt beside him, her silver hair falling across her face, her expression both relieved and sorrowful. "You're awake," she said softly, her voice trembling. Ethan nodded slowly, his voice hoarse. "We stopped him." Soraya looked toward the shattered remains of the throne, the crown broken into dust. "Yes," she whispered. "The king is gone." But her eyes were filled with something deeper. Fear. The core's light had changed. No longer blue or red, but white, pure and infinite. It felt peaceful, yet its energy was too vast, too alive. As if watching them, Ethan sat up with effort, looking around. The palace was half destroyed, the walls cracked, the floor covered with fragments of gold and crystal. Outside, through the great window, the sky burned with strange auroras, colors that had never been seen before. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. Soraya nodded. "It's the aftermath of rebirth," she said. "The core has reset the balance." She helped him stand, and together they looked at the core, which now floated higher, surrounded by calm energy. Ethan could feel it inside his chest, like a heartbeat matching his own. "It's still connected to me," he said. The Queen's voice was soft but certain. "It's connected to both of us." They stood in silence for a moment, both knowing that everything had changed. The Empire had lost its king, but in that loss, something greater had been found: unity. From the ruins, alien citizens gathered outside the palace, looking up at the glowing tower that now pulsed with gentle light. Some cried, some bowed, and some whispered the same word over and over. "Balance!" Soraya stepped forward, raising her hand toward the window. The light from the core followed her gesture, spreading across the horizon like dawn. She turned to Ethan, her eyes glowing faintly. "They will need guidance," she said. Ethan looked uncertain. "I'm not one of them." The Queen smiled gently. "You are more than that now." Her words were true, for Ethan could feel something different within him. He was no longer just human. The core had changed him, merging alien and human essence into one. He could feel the pulse of the planet, the rhythm of life in every stone and wind, and deep within, he understood. The core was not a weapon, not a throne, but a living heart that responded to unity. As the day passed, the people gathered in the great hall, their eyes filled with hope and fear. Soraya stood before them, tall and calm, her voice clear as crystal. "The king's age of rule is over," she declared. "From this day forward, no one will command by fear." Her words echoed through the hall, carried by the core's energy. "This world will be ruled by balance, by choice, and by those who understand both strength and compassion." The crowd bowed, and for the first time in centuries, peace settled over the alien world. Ethan stood beside her, unsure of his place in this new world, but when she looked at him, he felt that he belonged, and not by blood, but by destiny. That night they stood again before the core, its light softer now, almost gentle. "The core has given us peace," Soraya said, "but it took everything from us." Ethan nodded, his eyes heavy with thought. "Sometimes peace is the price of loss." The Queen looked up at the stars beyond the shattered roof. "Thalon wanted power," she whispered, "but power was never meant to rule. It was meant to guide." The core pulsed once more, and from its light came a voice. Calm, ancient, full of warmth. "You have done well. Children of two worlds," it said. "The balance has been restored, but it must be guarded." Ethan and Soraya exchanged glances, realizing that the core was not just speaking. It was giving them a choice. "To protect it," Ethan said softly, "we must stay." Soraya smiled. "Then we stay." The core's light grew brighter, wrapping around them in soft waves of white and gold. For a moment their forms shimmered, fading into the radiance. They could feel their hearts beating as one, their thoughts blending like two rivers, becoming one stream. The core whispered again, "Two lights, one purpose, one forever bound." Outside, the people looked up as the core sent a beam of light into the sky. It stretched far beyond the stars, signaling peace across the galaxy. And from that day on, legends would speak of the Queen of Light and the human of the core, two souls from different worlds who ended the reign of tyranny and awakened the dawn of harmony. In time, their names became myths, their faces became constellations drawn in the night sky. But deep within the core, where time and light meet, Ethan and Soraya still stood together, guardians of creation, watching over the stars, listening to the song of balance that echoed through every world. Their love became the pulse of the universe itself, eternal, endless, and alive. And so, the story of a human and a queen became the story of a new beginning, an empire reborn not through power, but through understanding. And among the endless stars, their voices still whispered to those who dared to listen. The heart of creation lives in balance.